Hello, my name is Scott Dahl. I'm a master's program director and professor of digital marketing and revenue management at Roches in Crown, Montana. Welcome to Leading Hospitality Through Turbulent Times. This session will be a presentation of about 35 minutes with 10 minutes for questions at the end. We're taking questions in writing only, so you can submit them as you go along. Just a quick reminder that the session is being recorded and will be available on your school's Moodle platform afterwards. I am extremely excited to kick off the series with a very special guest today. Steve Hood from STR Global is here with us. As I'm sure most of you are aware, STR Global is the hospitality industry's most widely used performance benchmarking agency. And for those of you who don't know Steve, he is Senior Vice President of Research and Director of the Share Center, the division of STR that is specifically tasked with connecting STR with hospitality higher education like us. And for those of you who are fortunate enough to have heard Steve speak in the past, you know it's time to buckle your seatbelt and get ready for a lot of great information in a short amount of time. Please feel free to ask your questions as we go along using the chat function. And with no further ado, my good friend Steve Hood.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for your kind introduction, Scott, and always enjoy interacting with your schools and your students. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share an update on the industry, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing screen now. And then we're going to push that out. You let me know when everybody can see that. So the topic today is a hotel industry update, and obviously this is related to COVID-19. Is everybody seeing that now, guys? Okay, here's the agenda. We're going to be taking a worldwide view of this. We're going to be looking at China, Asia, Europe, other parts, Mideast Africa, and Americas as well. So we're going to be taking sort of a big picture view of what's going on in the industry right now, as we're in the midst, obviously, of probably the most significant crisis the hotel industry has really ever faced. After we're looking at a performance update, we're going to be taking a look at some comparisons, some lessons to learn, and some good news as well. And then we're going to get into a brainstorming session as well as far as the future is concerned. To start with, we're going to take a total world view. This is obviously a map of the world, and this is a heat map. What we're looking at here, the little red and green dots, are occupancy percent change. Now, this is a running 7-day percent change, so it's a little different than what we look at a lot of times when we're looking at percent change. It is not year over year. So this is basically 7 days compared to the prior 7 days. And this is back in January, beginning of January, for the total world. You can see at this point in time, when we look at the world, what do we see? We see an equal amount of green dots, positive occupancy percent change, versus red dots, negative percent change. And most of those red dots are light red with a few exceptions. And but focus in, obviously, we have a little box around China here. Let's go from the week of January 12th. Now, keeping in mind, we're looking at daily data. When a lot of you have looked at STR data before, you have looked at monthly data. And yes, that's valuable, but in a situation like this, the daily data comes out every week. So in just a minute, we're going to be looking at data from last week, Sunday through Saturday, which took place just a couple days ago. So anyway, daily data, let's focus on China. Let's go to the next week, and we see a little bit more light red. And in China, we're looking at a pretty high concentration of light red. Now, this would be, think of it, January 26th in China. This would be during the Chinese New Year, right afterwards. And now we go to the next week, and basically that's where this was definitely an issue in China. You see the light red turns to medium red in almost every area of the world, with one exception, a couple dark red dots there for Beijing and Wuhan. And so at this point in China, China is on lockdown. So if if you lived in China and you went to visit your mom, your family for the Chinese New Year, you were stuck. You were not able to travel back to where you really lived, and you had to stick it out. And hotels, of course, were impacted as well, and many of these hotels the occupancy dropped, and many of these hotels were closed. I'll share some closure data with you as well. In 1 week later, and we see medium red turns to dark red in a lot of areas throughout China, and now we're beginning to see medium red in other parts of Asia as well. You go again, about the same. Medium red throughout China. And now here we go to March 1. At March 1, we see the first sign of impact in Europe. We see Italy in medium red. And then if you see that little dot of dark red, that's Milan. And that was one of the first markets that were shut down and were significantly impacted by the virus. We go one more month, and we're now seeing Europe in, a fair amount of Europe in the medium red, all of Italy, a fair amount of Europe in light red, Europe in medium red. And now we go to March 15. By mid-March, this was an issue everywhere. You see Europe is almost all red with just a few exceptions. Even Americas, red at this point. A lot of people shifted and were working from home. So significant impact all over the world. Now we go from March 15 to March 22. Wow, what a big jump. We're now from light red in most of the world to medium and dark red in most of the world by the end of March. Now we go to March 29. Here we're in April. Look at the impact in April in Europe, almost all of Europe in dark red. And then now we're jumping up to just last week. When we're looking at data for just last week, we do see a lot of dark red, but those little green things are shoots, green shoots emerging. So we are actually seeing, some positive, some signs that are seeing some positive improvement. And that's, of course, what we'll be looking at more and more in the future. You'll notice at these most recent slides, you're seeing China is back to light red and medium red where it had been dark, and we'll jump into China now and look a little bit more at what's going on there. Of course, that's where it started, and that's why we're going back. We're back to January data, just focused in on China at this point in time. Now, there are a lot of lines on here, and this is sort of spaghetti. So I'm not trying to get you to identify the different markets. One of the lines is mainland China, but I just want you to get an idea of the trending here. All markets at this point in China are headed down. If you look at normal occupancy at the beginning of January, we're in the range of 60, 70, 80%. By the end of January, all of those were tanking. You see the Wuhan lockdown on March 24th, I think that is, and then by the end of, January 24th, then by the end of January, everything was down to an occupancy of close to 10% in China. So that's at the end of January. Now let's jump ahead. This is not splitting out the markets, but look at the blue line. Here we're looking at three areas of the world. We're looking at China, and then we're looking at Europe, and then we're looking at US. At the beginning of February, China is still heading down. It reaches its valley, the lowest point, the week of February 8th. First week of February, China as a country had occupancy less than 10%. Now, look at that blue line since. In the 10 weeks that follow, occupancy in China has trended up. Last week, so as of last Saturday, occupancy in China was nearly 32%. Now, at any different time in history, that would be dismal. But when 10 weeks ago, you were at 9%, 32% is looking really sweet. So let's look at the other areas of the world at the same time. You'll see the big impact started mid-March. Europe led by just about a week, and certain in Europe, certain areas, places like Italy, were impacted more, were impacted earlier. Same with Switzerland. You saw an impact just a week or two after Italy, of course, due to proximity, and Europe's headed down. U.S. followed shortly after. Now look at where we're at in Europe and U.S. right now. Europe, for the last couple of weeks, has been below 10%. U.S. went down to about 20%, and just last week in the U.S. we saw a small uptick. Now we're not sure that's going to continue. I'm not convinced we're at the bottom, but in between this week and last week in the U.S. we did see a small uptick. Now, Europe is obviously a wider geographic area, so that trough may take longer. The trough in China took about 2 months until recovery, and obviously there's a lot of speculation in terms of what does the trough look like, what does the bottom look like in these various areas of the world. But that's where we're at right now. This slide just has the same data indexed by time. So we're basically looking at event plus 1 week, event plus 2 week, event plus 3 week, just to compare the slopes of these different downturns. And you can see they're, somewhat similar. And but again, we're interested in what do these troughs look like in the various areas of the world, and that's why we're looking at that daily data on a very closely on a week by week basis. Here, we're coming back to China, but now we're expanding a little bit and looking throughout Asia as China was impacted. And we're backing up to one of the worst weeks in Asia history. We're going back to early March, and we're seeing look at the markets in China. A lot of markets like Sanya, -91, and this is RevPAR percent change. Remember, that's occupancy. That's revenue per available room is a combination of occupancy plus ADR. So we're seeing sort of a combined impact here. But a place like Sanya, -91. Major markets in China, Hong Kong, Macau, Shanghai, Beijing, all close to -90. And then we're beginning to see it move out to places like Bangkok and Bali and Australia and Tokyo, where we see a lot of -50s. And now that continued. And keep in mind, for any of the slides that I'm showing you, I can get you updated data and trended data to study and analyze these kinds of impacts on areas. For example, somebody wants to study Japan, you could do that and get data on Japan and look at how all the markets in Japan were impacted. We have presentations as well. Ooh, Scott, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Hey, Steve. 2 questions for you. First of all, one of them coming up from a number of the members of our audience. Any chance you could shut the dialog box? It's in the middle of the map. and then there's a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Then there's a second question, actually, which has come up a couple times, and it's actually a perfect time to pose that one. And you mentioned a little bit about KPIs, but I was wondering if you could just share with some people that don't know, what's the source of the data that you're sharing with us?
Yes, good question. STR obtains data from all the hotels and hotel companies around the world. And some of you are familiar with how this works, but STR has a database of over 200,000 hotels in every area of the world, over 200 different countries. We then obtain data from approximately 70,000 hotels in all of those countries. Now, we obtain data from every major hotel chain, even domestic chains as well. So the large multinationals like Hilton and Marriott, but then the very small chains that may just be a country-wide chain or a regional chain. We're getting data from all of those. We get data from the corporate offices, and they share both weekly and monthly data to us. We then what STR does is, as Scott mentioned, we provide a benchmarking service to all of these hotels and, of course, to all of the chains. We deal with nearly 1,000 different chains, 70,000 hotels. So we're basically getting data from their corporate offices. It's, in some cases, if it's an independent, they may be coming on a website entering that data, but most of it comes straight from corporate office. So basically from the property management system at the Movenpick goes to corporate headquarters and then goes to STR. So that's how we're obtaining data. Does that make sense? Good. Okay, so here's basically Asia in beginning of March. Now let's go back to China for just a second, and let's go from March to where we're at right now, because obviously people are focused on recovery and trying to figure out what is that recovery going to look like, and how is it going on, what's going on right now in China. And if you take a look, here are some major markets in China: Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou. We see that Beijing is a little slower in the recovery process, but we see other markets are getting up to 30 and 40%. These are some of the big markets. Here are some of the destination type markets. These tend to be more resort markets, weekend getaway situations, and look at some of the big numbers here. We're seeing some of these getaway destinations are getting up to 50 and 70%. This is showing the major festival that took place April 4 through 6, and look at the big surge. What's that show you? That shows you some good news, because it shows you that, hey, people are getting out, and they're actually are being tempted to get out and travel during right after this big event, and people are all focused on that right now. Here's another slide showing types of hotels in China, and that's another way people are analyzing recovery. They're trying to figure out which hotels are going to recover quickest. From an occupancy point of view, you see some of these mid-scale and economy hotels are recovering quickly. Now, occupancy at this point in history with an event like what we have going on is complicated, because occupancy is mixed. In some cases, occupancy is related to quarantine. In some cases, occupancy might be related to healthcare workers. So it is complicated, but you see some of these lower end hotels are up to around 50%. We could look at ADR. I have a slide similar to this when it comes to ADR, and you'll see a bit of a different story. Here are some recovery lessons that we're looking at in China, and just one of the things I have is one of the things we tracked in China were closed hotels. During the worst part of the situation, we had a huge number of hotels that were closed in China. Doors were shut. They were not doing business. Now, what we were hearing from people at that point in time was a lot of these hotels aren't going to reopen at all. They are just out of business. The good news is a lot of these hotels are reopening. We have about 90 to 95% of these hotels have reopened. There are some other recovery lessons on here as well. Domestic versus leisure, domestic leisure travel. They're going to be, we're seeing, some demand drivers there, corporate business at high tech zones and things like that. And we can talk more about that. As we leave China, this slide here shows all the other countries in Asia. And if you look at that time period, as we go through the month of March, and it's not important to identify which of these countries, but just you see the general trend, all these countries decreased significantly down to the negative 60 was the best, down to negative 90 when it comes to actual occupancy, occupancy percent change, negative numbers there. Huge, every country and almost every country in Asia was negatively impacted shortly after China. These were the countries that were that were initially locked down. 4 countries were placed on lockdown. This goes back to the beginning of March when it was sort of at its worst, and you see all 4 of these countries huge impacts when it comes to occupancy percent change. Here are other countries throughout Asia, and as I said, this is all data that we can get to you. We can get you updated data as well, so let us know. But look at some of the countries that were most significantly impacted. You see places like Singapore and Vietnam. Now, they dipped even farther in the next couple weeks, but those countries that were highly dependent upon tourism, are feeling the pain the most. When we turn to Europe, we're seeing, and this is early March as well, but early March, Italy was just, really hurting. And then other countries, Austria, France, Switzerland, all heading down in that downward direction as well. This map of Europe shows one of the worst weeks, mid-March, and you can see, look at the amount of negative 90s when it comes to RevPAR percent change throughout Europe. No area is immune to this. The best you see on here is markets in Russia like St. Petersburg and Moscow that are in the 60s. Hard to think that those were good numbers, but that was the best you had. Even going to Mideast Africa, look at the impact there. Look at all the countries there and the major impacts of these countries. These are actual occupancies in the Mideast, and Dubai at an occupancy of 21%, for example. Here are African countries, and we're going through. This is a little earlier in the process. We can get you updated Africa data, but you're seeing all these markets taking a hit here. This is just recently. Look at the major gateway type markets in the negative 90s. Now we're going to turn to Americas, and we see the Canada trend heading down, very similar to the Europe trend. Interesting to see. And then Latin America, not immune. Look at the huge negative numbers throughout Latin America. Small increase in Peru, which I can talk to you more about. We have offices all over the world, and so we can get you in touch with local folks to help explain some of these differences. Here's Mexico. Major markets in Mexico all down in the 10% absolute occupancy. Yeah, a lot of people early on in this thought Caribbean might be isolated from this, but look at what we see. Everybody in the 10%, all of these countries in the 10% area. And of course, when we turn to the U.S., here is a look at the last 5 weeks. Notice the RevPAR percent change numbers for the U.S. 5 weeks ago, we hit negative 70. And then a week later, negative 80, negative 82, negative 84. And last week we saw a small uptick, and we're not ready to say it's over and to say it's increasing, but we did see a small increase, and we'll have to wait to see what happens next week. To put this in proportion, here we're looking at the worst possible weeks in the last 2 declines. Notice that was negative 38 and negative 25. Look at the proportion of where we're at now. Worst week in this cycle, negative 83. The week following is on there as well. But just to help you see the enormous proportion of where we're at right now in terms of this event compared to the prior 2. No surprise here. Group business has basically disappeared, and you guys know every conference is postponed, Olympics postponed, Dubai Expo postponed. Group business is basically dried up completely. This shows you a perspective of the top markets in the U.S. I can get you that data anywhere in the world, but group business is basically dried up completely. Here's a world look at occupancy percent change, and we put these in various buckets. Look at the number of countries that are in the negative, that are below negative 90, or in the 80 to 90, or in the 70 to 80. It's hard to believe that a country like Australia or New Zealand would be excited about only being negative 50, but that's the enormous impact of what we're seeing now with this event. hopefully that shows you a little bit of what's going on around the world, and we can get you more information. Now let's turn our attention a little bit to recovery and to comparisons, because that's one of the things that the industry is definitely trying to do at this point. What are they doing? They're looking at past events to try to help understand what we're in now. Obviously, this event is unique. There's not going to be a perfect comparison, but that's what people, they are trying to learn from some of these past events, look at some patterns, look at some try to identify some takeaways. So one of the things that people talk a lot about when it comes to recovery is they try to assign a letter. Is this recovery going to be, what type of letter? For example, here's a look at a prior event that people would characterize as being a V recovery. By V, what are we seeing? We're seeing a sharp decline and a relatively short-term decline. We're looking at SARS in 2003 and the impact upon markets in China. We see a downturn that took about 3 months, but then what do we see? A very quick recovery back to pre-SARS trends, back to, but it all happened within about a 6-month time period until it was back to normal. People would characterize that as a very quick recovery. V. At the very beginning of this event, people were hoping that COVID-19 would be very similar to SARS. At this point, people realize it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to rebound as quickly as it did in SARS, but that is obviously definitely something people are looking at. Then people started looking at the 2009 downturn and begin to think, well, maybe this isn't going to be a V, but it's going to be more gradual. It's going to take more time, and it'll be more like a U. You can see, it's a little more U-shaped. It took longer to get to the bottom, took longer to recover, and that would be what people would characterize more as a U-type situation and a U recovery. So that's being discussed as well. Now, here is what somebody would characterize as an L recovery, and you can see how industry folks just scrutinize this, the L recovery. And of course, these recoveries are going to be different in different areas of the world and even different for different types of hotels. The Mideast during 2009 never fully recovered. Now, a lot of that was related to supply growth in the Mideast. There's a huge increase in hotels being built, and of course that makes it very difficult for occupancy and then therefore for RevPAR to rebound. So this would be characterized more as an L recovery. Here's another thing that's getting talked about a lot: a W recovery, and you'll notice various stages. Look at the yellow line, the release stage. People think, well, maybe it won't double dip, but maybe it'll just drag and then go up. So that would be a modified W, but that's one of the big things that industry is definitely trying to look at. Here's sort of some of our forecasts. Asia, Europe, our forecasts are all, pointing towards a pretty serious pretty serious downturn in 2020, and then a rebound in 2021, and then hopefully back to prior COVID-19 levels in 2022. And we can get you forecast data if you'd be interested in exploring that more. Other things that people are looking back in time, they're looking at prior events. Here's an example of SARS, the impact upon Thailand, N1H1, the impact upon Mexico. Both of those were pretty quick events, and demand rebounded quickly. People are obviously looking at past economic cycles. If you notice, here's a comparison of the 2001 downturn, the 2009 downturn, and now we'll, in a few months, we'll add to that the 2020 downturn, and we'll be able to compare those cycles. This slide shows a comparison when it comes to average daily rate % change between cycle 1, that's the light purple line, and cycle 2, the dark purple line. You'll notice cycle 1, what do you see? a smaller drop, but a quicker drop, 12 months to reach bottom, 24 months to recover. Now, in this situation, the bottom's going to be much farther, but the time to bottom and the time to recovery, people are optimistic and hoping it's going to be more of a 12-month, 24-month scenario rather than a 19-month to 37-month scenario. But that's the kind of thing people are looking at. This shows a similar trend, but with monthly data. This was running 12-month data, showing you sharp drops in ADR during cycle 1, which here is in light blue. And now, almost done, just a few lessons to learn. The group and transient data that I shared with you earlier is going to be very important, and a lot of people are going to be looking at that very closely during this recovery. Here we're looking at demand, rooms sold, and we're splitting out the transient demand from the group demand. Now, what do we see? As we said before, group business is basically zero at this point. That's going to take a lot longer to rebound. You see, that's the dark blue bars, much longer and much more time to recover. Look at the light blue, and important to see, transient demand recovers much quicker, 7-month time frame for the transient demand. Now think about transient is what? It's going to be individual business travelers, it's going to be leisure travelers, it's going to be people, getting away on vacations, weekend getaway type things. So that's the transient traveler. We see a much quicker rebound. If I'm fortunate enough to still be employed and have money, and think of it, think of the world right now. Everybody's locked up for a couple months. There's thought that there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand. So we could see in this situation a transient rebound even quicker, perhaps, than we did in 2009. Some of that is explained by the average daily rate. Look how, in 2009, look how much discounting went on in for the transient traveler, and that was actually one of the concerns in 2009. People felt like there was way too much discounting, and that's something we're exploring and analyzing a lot when it comes to the average daily rate. But obviously, you see that the hotels, were doing some significant discounting, again, tempting that transient traveler to get back out on the road and get back traveling again. Here's another type of hotel that rebounded very quickly. Here we're looking at luxury resort hotels, and look at the impact. Not as significant at all as other hotels, and a very quick rebound when it comes to luxury resort hotels. Another important thing in terms of a lesson to learn is the domestic versus international travel. That'll be a big thing coming out of, this is showing it coming out of SARS. I have another one that shows it coming out of 2009 as well. And you're going to see a lot more domestic travel. Now that could be shorter flights, or it could be drive-to situations. And we're going to tend to see a lot more of that than international. Finally, just a couple of things to close with, just some good news. One of the things that I share here is one bright spot. Rooms sold, demand, and occupancy for most areas of the world are at an all-time high. Now, the good news is that even with a big drop, occupancies are still going to be close to 60% potentially in areas around the world. This is showing a comparison of 2007 to 9 to what it might be in 2019-20. If it was around a negative 10% drop. It could be more than that, though. And another bright spot is the fact that every survey that you see regarding travel intention, a lot of companies out there do travel intention surveys, looks like that travel intention number is at an all-time high. This is one we do with tourism. This is a slide from Tourism Economics. We do our forecasting with them. All-time high in 2020. The pie chart is one a survey we did in China. You look at that, even in March, this was recent, over 50% of the people we surveyed in China intended to travel more in the next 12 months than in the past 12 months. So a lot of intention to travel. Resources real quickly, our str.com website. There is a link on there that you can click on that goes to COVID-19 updates. You can see all the past updates. So there'll be webinars on there of 20 or 30 webinars. You can view the recordings of those. Many of those will be much more localized. So somebody just did a webinar on Iberian Peninsula, so you can see what's going on in Spain and Portugal, or ASEAN, so you can see what's going on in specific cities there, or China, specific countries there. HotelNewsNow.com, most of you know that's our sister company, great place. All of the articles there are related to COVID-19 now, HR implications, technology implications, and so on. And then our Share Center website as well. So let us know if we can help you. Scott suggested I add one more thing in there. You guys have been involved in market study competitions before. Les Roches has sent several teams to those competitions. We've done those all over the world. In the fall, we will be doing a virtual competition. We'd love to have you involved and tell you more about that. We do, and we do have online training in Chia and Kata that we do as well. And Scott will be getting more information out about that as well. But please let us know how we can help. And that's it for my presentation. So I'm going to actually stop sharing screens now and turn it over to Scott for questions.
All right. So first of all, for those of you that weren't exactly sure what I meant by fasten your seatbelt, I think you understand fully now. Steve, that was amazing, amazing information. And thank you for the explanation about where the data comes from. There are a lot of questions about that. I did receive a lot of questions about STR that were pretty basic, and I think I've shared my email address on the chat a number of times. But if you have questions about STR, you're interested in information about data, either figure out who it is on your campus that would be the right person to speak with, or don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is very easy, scott.dahl@laroche.edu, and I'd be more than happy to help you facilitate getting some data. It's really very fun, to be honest with you, to back up some of the theoretical stuff you're doing with the ability to get into real hotel data and really to understand the implications of performance on hotels. So Steve, I want to go ahead and I'm going to try to publish this question here, but there was a very interesting question from a student that said a student by the name of May, who said they saw a picture of Wangshan, which is a tourist site in China, that was packed after the lockdown restrictions were stopped. And she's wondering what you think about whether that's possibly premature to start reopening these sites and bringing tourism back so quickly.
Yeah, that is a great question. Where do you go?
Oh, I'm here.
Good. That is a great question, and that's, that'll be really interesting. I think that's why all the world is looking so closely at China right now, because areas, and I was not familiar with that one, but I think everybody is trying to see what that recovery is going to look like. The festival, I showed the example of the festival, and that could have very well taken place during that festival, April 4 through 6. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be glad to maybe try to get you in touch with our China people and see if they have more information to share about that. But very possible. I think the world is just looking, focused on China right now to see, what are the possible, what are the possible scenarios that are going to play out in some of these cities, and when some of the, when you have huge crowds back to some of these cities, are they going to, how are the tourists going to behave, and are they going to continue to be careful and practice social distancing, or and how will the virus cases respond? Will they go back up? And so I think at this point it'll be really interesting to watch and see how that all plays out.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Another question we had from Sophia, another very good question. She's wondering your opinion if you think that the recovery or the rebound will take longer than SARS, considering that a greater percentage of the global population has been affected by COVID.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. And I think you're right. I think people were hoping that it was going to be more like a SARS, but I think nobody in the world now would think that that would be the case. Now I think we're going to, we're sort of between that 2001 recovery and the 2009 recovery. And I think we're going to see something, somewhere in between that in terms of timing. Unfortunately, the dip is going to be more. And the occupancy dip for sure is going to be much farther than in 2009. I think there's a lot of concern about the ADR dip. If you talk to an industry professional, one of their big concerns and problems that they saw in 2009 was the discounting that went on in 2009. Obviously, demand was negatively impacted, but hotels significantly dropped their average daily rates, and that was certainly a concern. Now, some some people would say, oh, well, that was related to OTAs and price transparency and things like that, and so it'll be interesting. There's a big question: are the hotel general managers of 2020 more sophisticated than the hotel general managers and the revenue managers of 2009 and 2010? 10 years have gone by. Have they learned lessons, and that they can apply to revenue management and to not to be tempted to discount as much? I think the other question is related to profitability. Are the hotels of 2020, are they able to operate more efficiently than the hotels of 2009? And will we see things like GoPar and impacted as much as in 2020 as we did in 2009? So lots of good questions there.
Okay, Steve. I tell you what, we're actually kind of running relatively close to our time, and so I'm going to take a couple of questions and sort of paraphrase them a little bit, and that has to do with the future outlook for people. And let me see if I can find. Let's see. Here's a good one. Considering all this stuff, right? What's your opinion about internship opportunities? Do you feel like, in the specific question, do you feel like there'll be some stuff happening in October? There was an earlier question about whether the spring would be, a better time really for opportunities and careers. And so I'm just kind of wondering let's close it on, if you were getting ready to graduate right now, would you take a 3-month online course? Would you get a master's degree? What exactly would you do?
Yeah, well, I'd sure be tempted to, if there was a summer program or a master's program. I would certainly be tempted to consider that. There's certainly a lot to say to be graduating a year from now rather than now. But if that's not an option, and it might not be, then I think a lot of it is thinking about the hotel that's going to need me, and two things: the hotel that's going to need me, and what they're going to need me for. Okay, so let's first talk about the hotel that's going to need me. As you saw in the numbers, it's the transient traveler. Don't expect to go to a conference hotel, a big meeting and event type hotel, and get a job. Not this year. Maybe next year. They're not going to be the types of hotels that are going to be interested in talking to me for either internships or for a job. Now, what type will? Think about the transient traveler. Where's that transient traveler going to be going? Now, we saw luxury hotels rebound the quickest, but what types of luxury hotels? It's the boutique type luxury resort hotels, not the big cities, but the more remote destinations. So if I was in US, I wouldn't be going to Miami Beach. I'd be going to more, smaller cities, smaller hotels, and ones that are going to attract the high-end traveler. And think too, the domestic traveler. So you're not talking about these international hotspots. You're talking, hey, if I'm a little nervous about flying, where am I going to drive to, or where am I going to take a quick 1-hour trip to? Those are the types of hotels that I think you should be targeting. Now, let's talk about what their needs are going to be. Think about this type of situation. First of all, a lot of these places have furloughed people at this point in time, or laid them off. So a couple months from now, they're going to be looking at bringing these people back on. What if they're looking at you at the same time? If you have a similar skill set, you could be just as valuable to them, and potentially as valuable to them at a lower price point, and so they could be easily tempted. Think about some of the skills. Analytical skills will be critical, and that's part of why Scott is so passionate about helping you guys learn analytical skills, because and we've already heard that some of our customers have unfortunately, and this is tragic, if those analytical people aren't there anymore, well, how do we interpret this data? How do we interpret this report? Think of some of the other possibilities. Marketing, digital marketing, social media. If I was a hotel right now and my doors were closed, what would I be thinking about? I'd be sitting down. If I was a GM, I'd be sitting down with my marketing people saying, hey, you guys dream up the slickest, coolest, most creative marketing campaign to put on our website, and to get travelers to be looking, tourists to be looking at our hotel. Think about what you'd be doing. You'd be, shooting video of people cleaning the hotel. Here we're cleaning the lobby. Here we're cleaning your room. Here we're cleaning the restaurant, the pool. Think of all the videos that you want your people seeing, so they feel safe and secure to come to your hotel. Then what? Once those doors open, that same group of marketing people are out there going to be shooting video of, here's a happy family sitting around the pool. Yes, they're practicing social distancing. It's not mobbed. It's not like the picture that somebody shared with hundreds of people, but they're enjoying the pool. They're having fun at our destination while still being safe. And here's a picture of happy families at the beach, at the pool, enjoying our amenities, and just plastering the website with those types of things. And one of the cool things is those are things that you guys can do well. Think about virtual meetings. I was working with a school just recently that pulled off the coolest virtual meeting that I ever saw. All kinds of neat things that you have to offer. So, definitely don't give up. Definitely, there's lots of opportunities. You guys just have to be more creative and really figure out how what you can lend to some of these hotels. My daughter actually works at a hotel near where I live in the U.S. And she's teaching virtual yoga classes to clients. So people who used to visit that hotel, they can't visit now because the doors are closed. What can they do instead? They can take a virtual yoga class, and it's just like they're at the hotel. So that hotel is filming video of the farm and all the kinds of things going on. So sorry, didn't mean to ramble, but lots of opportunities.
All right, Steve, thanks very much. I've been a laugh for a little while about virtual yoga, to be honest with you. What I heard you say and all that I would like to point out, since I have the opportunity to do it right now, is it seems like revenue management and digital marketing is going to be something that's in demand, along with a lot of other things. I think your insight was amazing, and I actually believe there's a really cool article, if you want to look at it, in Forbes, that talks about past crisis and then the period of innovation that typically follows crisis. And so I think that we all have that to look forward to, quite frankly. And I appreciate you focusing on some of the forward-looking stuff. I'm going to hang out for a while and respond to the chat, because there's quite a few more questions in the chat that are either very detailed or similar. But I really want to thank you, Steve, very much for kicking off this series for us in a very cool way, in a way that, quite frankly, based on the questions alone, was extremely engaging for people. And I'll probably be here answering chat questions for a while, but that's good news. So thank you very much. Thanks on behalf of the students of both Glion and Roches, and thank you also from the leadership of both schools. We really appreciate what you shared with us today. Huge value. And finally, thank you to everyone that joined us today. and look forward to more in the way that we've communicating the leadership series to you, because there's a lot of really, really incredible stuff, including a couple of really incredible sessions next week. So have a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon.